My name is Richard Furrow, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm Cloud Hired.
I'm Cloud Hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm Cloud Hired.
So I'm Cloud Hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired. Because of Google Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am Cloud Hired. Thank you, Mike and the GlowCloud team.
Welcome, everyone. I am Michael Gibbs. I am joined here by Mark Milovanovic, and we're here today to help you build your technology career. Maybe you desire to be working cybersecurity as a cybersecurity engineer or a cybersecurity architect or a cloud architect or a network architect or an AI architect or an enterprise architect. We're here to make your journey easy. I've now been an IT architect now for over 25 years. And pretty much every one of the architecture roles you can think of, network architect, cloud architect, enterprise architect, business architect, you name it. And I spent more than 2 decades helping people get their first tech job or get promoted in tech. So me and usually someone from my staff who also has an extensive tech background, we like to come at least once a week to answer your questions. Because when it comes to starting your career, I don't want you to make the same mistakes I made. And, my clients don't have to make those kind of mistakes because I already made them and I already learned from them. And after 20 years of working with countless individuals and watching them get hired at Apple and Amazon and Cisco and Google and Microsoft and IBM and Accenture and KPMG and Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, JP Morgan Chase Bank, Zscaler, Palo Alto Networks, we know what employers want. So ask your questions so we can help you build your career. I'm going to have Mark introduce himself in a minute, but before he does, I want to tell you about 3 things that we offer you to help you in your career. Sign up for the completely free AWS Solutions Architect Associate Bootcamp. The Solutions Architect training and certification is a great way to help you get an interview. And it's a nice certification that will help you get to the interview stage. So once you get past that, it's going to be up to your architect skills, which are something completely different. But getting that certification will make it a lot easier for the interviews. So we're going to run the AWS Solutions Architect Associate Bootcamp, and we're going to add components to the AWS Advanced Networking, the AWS Security Advanced, and of course, a lot of the new machine learning and artificial intelligence tools, because we want to prepare you a lot better than just to pass the certification. So come join us. It's going to be free. And it's going to be in 2 weeks. So sign up now. The link is in the description of this video and the chat box. Now, if you want to be a cloud architect, and it's one of the best jobs ever, you have to know how to get there. You need to know what are the right skills, because they're not coding, they're not configuring, but you need to know what we do, how to get those skills, and what employers are looking for, and even how to bypass HR so you don't get auto-rejected when you lack experience. We're going to cover this tomorrow evening completely free. It'll be on Zoom. We'll talk for a little while. After we have the discussion, you can ask us questions. We will do whatever we need to help you, and it's completely free. So sign up for your how to get your first cloud architect job, enterprise architect webinar. We're going to have it tomorrow night. Now, one other thing I wanted to tell you, or is that we are currently offering 50% off site-wide on every program we have. So if you've been waiting for a time to get a best price, this is it. This is now. Go take care of it. So bring us your questions so we can help you build your technology career. Before we do, Mark, would you like to introduce yourself? I will tell you that Mark is our Chief Technology Officer. I'll tell you that he's a CCIE, a Cisco Certified Internet Expert. I'll tell you that he's got over 10 years experience at all levels of engineering and architecture. But I'll let him tell you about you, but Mark's our Chief Technology Officer.
Hello, everybody. As Mike said, my name is Mark, last name Milovanovic. I'm very excited to be here. Just like Mike, I have a little less experience than him, about a decade of experience, but it's also been within engineering, the architecture, the design aspects, helping customers get to their goals. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, starting is really sometimes the most difficult thing to do. And while I definitely wouldn't say that it was as sparse as regards to guidance, what I had a few years ago, maybe 20 or 30 years ago, it's still rough out there. There's a lot of things to go through. A lot of people have opinions. Everybody tries to tell you what the best thing or the newest thing, the best thing since sliced bread, whatever saying you want to use is. So it's our little way of being able to give back to the community, to provide some of you, depending on your questions, some type of direction, right? So that we can point you into the right direction, so that you can obtain an object or subject, and that perhaps based on your questions also provide you with some clarity. Because we know to accomplish anything in life, if you don't know what to focus on, it's going to be very difficult to move ahead. You're going to lose motivation. You at times are going to take the wrong turn because a lack of focus is a lack of clarity, which eventually will also be a lack of direction. So hopefully these sessions that we do once a week for everybody here is going to be of benefit. I strongly urge you, take advantage of them, ask questions in regards to how you could develop your career, either if you're starting off from scratch, or if you're looking to pivot perhaps from one career to another one, we're here for that as well. And if you're an engineer or otherwise already an architect, if you have questions that we'd like to bring to our attention, we're always welcome to field those as well, to give you perhaps our opinion based on subjectively on what you present to us, or perhaps even on our experience. So in either case, I'm really excited, and let's get it on. Let's bring about your questions. We'd be happy to answer them for you. All right, first question is from Cloud Doctor. Hello, everyone. Do cloud architects need to know networking in depth or only the fundamentals?
Cloud Doctor, that's a great question. So if we look at the cloud, it's somebody else's data center and network. That's really all it is that we're renting space in. If we don't, as cloud architects, know networking, our architectures aren't going to work. Because if you don't have the right routing, the right IP addressing, nothing will work. So everything will fall apart. If you don't understand networking, you won't understand how to secure things either. Because when you're thinking in terms of an access control list, it's a packet filter, which is from networking. When you're thinking of things like a firewall rule, again, it's coming out of networking. So networking is crucial. Now, how much networking is actually the question. And it also depends on what people consider depth. So Mark and I are network architects. So I'll explain what that depth is. So prior to learning architecture, I practiced internal medicine. And here's the way a physician is trained, and this is for depth. They go to 4 years of undergraduate to learn the way the body works. They go to 4 years of medical school to learn to practice medicine. After that, they typically do a 1-year internship, which is where you follow other people around, and then you do the 3 or 5 year residency. Now, at that point, when somebody graduates that residency, they're considered an expert. And why are they an expert? Because they have 10,000 hours in just one thing. And that's why physicians are typically called doctor, and they're assumed to be an expert once they start getting their license and they're in practice. So if you're asking networking and Mark, you know, a good architect earns more than a physician. So we have to know networking as well as that physician needs to know medicine if we're network architects. So a cloud architect is not a network architect. It is a kind of every kind of person architect, like the family doctor. The cloud architect is going to be involved in networking, security, data, to a small degree applications, the infrastructure, the everything. So you're going to be there. And when you have to be kind of figuring out stuff from 15, 20 people's different careers, you can't get too deep on anything. So what I would say the level of networking that a cloud architect would use to use, and I hate to use certifications. I hate it because a lot of people pass certifications and still don't know anything, but some people pass a certification and know something. So the old Cisco certified network professional is where it used to be 4 exams with probably a good level of networking fundamentals for a cloud architect. So, it's not that hard for us to teach those fundamentals, and we teach it in our program, but we have to understand that we're not building anything. We're architecting it. Architects don't touch the technology. So for us, it's going to be the conceptual levels of how these things actually work. And what I mean by that is, how, if we're going to use BGP, how does BGP work? How does that finite state machine work? Where it starts and where it goes to where it's anyway, it starts. I don't want to go there right now. Mark, you could help me with this. I'm having a mind blank.
Yep,
I don't, 5 minutes later, it'll be hitting me and I'll be thinking of the finite state machine. But you need to understand how that finite state machine works. You also need to understand, what are your parameters that you can tune? What are your attributes? So you need to understand what are those BGP attributes. And then you need to understand how BGP will actually choose a path. Because if you're going to do VPC peering, you're going to be dealing with BGP. If you're going to be dealing with the direct connection to the cloud, you're going to be dealing with BGP. If you're going to use your cloud as a transit WAN, you're going to need to know BGP. If you're setting up a transit VPC, you're going to need to know BGP as a cloud architect or a solution architect. It's going to be critical to you. But that's not deep. That's still, elemental level of networking. Deep would be something that Mark or I would have done when someone said, "Hi, Mike, I need to have IP video across my network. I need to make sure in the event of a router or a cable or anything that we can reroute our traffic within 40 milliseconds to get to the destination so no one knows it." That's where you got to get deep. And that's a specialty architect, but you won't get there. So here's going to be the process, Cloud Doctor. Remember, architecture is a team sport. You will never design an architecture as a cloud architect or a solution architect by yourself. You will also never configure the architecture because architects don't do that. You will not be writing Python scripts or Bash shell scripts or Linux scripts. That's not part of our job. We have to learn the requirements from the executive team, the future of their business, understand their business processes, understand their current data, their current technology, and then from their goals and future business needs, can we go to the future architecture of what we need. After that, we need to think about a governance structure that can manage this. We've got to go present our architectures to stakeholders, get their feedback, tune the architecture based upon their needs. Then we've got to document it again, negotiate it, help sell it if we work at a vendor, like as a solution architect, determine the organization's readiness and capacity for change, and then we're gone. And then they bring in a team of engineers to go build it. So understand, when you've got to know that much business and that much tech, you can't get too deep on anything. So, but networking is really important. And the reason it's important is the cloud is nothing more than someone else's network in a data center. And if you can really summarize that and really grasp it in your mind, that the cloud is a virtual representation of what we've been doing for the last 30 to 50 years. It's just normally we work on a physical server, and in the cloud we work on a virtual machine. Normally we work on a physical router, and in the cloud it's a virtual router. Might even be running the same Cisco software, but it's on a virtual machine versus the physical device itself. So get a good knowledge of networking. And here's the reason why. The people, you'll see typically 2 kinds of architects that you find out there. You'll find the people that come from an application-centric perspective, and they tend to be pretty good from application design, and they start thinking of the world in terms of applications. But they typically don't know infrastructure. And then you find your networking and your infrastructure people that know obviously less about the applications, but know all about the infrastructure. And the infrastructure is the secret to making sure your systems are highly available. If you tried to ask a network engineer to create a single cloud an architecture on a single cloud in 2 availability zones in 2 regions, they'd laugh and say, this is not high availability. And why? Because the network engineers and network architects were designing clouds for the last few decades. And they would say, okay, no, in networking, we always use 2 providers. If I need 2 links to the cloud, one will be on AT&T and one will be on Verizon. Because when one of those networks goes down, we're going to lose everything. So when you come from that networking perspective, or at least you get networking, you'll understand the principles of high availability, because networking is where that stuff comes from. The people that built the networks, like the power network, that stuff's usually pretty available and it's got high availability architectures. And if you think about the infrastructure that makes the whole internet work, that just can't go down. And these private networks can't go down, because imagine, Cloud Doctor, you're dealing with a 911 emergency system and someone tries to call 911 or 999 in the UK and the police don't show up because the system's not there. Or you're dealing with a hospital where a patient's in the middle of surgery and they're trying to look at somebody's electronic health record because something's not going to work and it's not there and the patient dies. So if you know networking, you'll make sure you know how to make those systems work all the time.
Yeah, you brought out something very important, Mike. And it's really, it's one of those cliches you hear in design work and architecture, but it does really depend, Cloud Doctor. That's really the answer here. And the reason I mentioned that, Mike did very good in laying out a foundation when it comes to some of the technologies that it doesn't matter in what capacity as a cloud architect you'll be in, that you have to learn about. One of them, of course, would be virtualization. You kind of want to understand how the actual environment is built when it comes to cloud service providers. Then on top of it is the underlying infrastructure, which is going to be your traditional data center. So you'll want to learn a little bit about how that data center is put together, both from a what we call a logical perspective, meaning what type of routing protocols you're going to be using, if you're going to have to figure out in regards to servers and serverless, how that kind of functions in there. Of course, we need to put the stuff somewhere, right? Our data. So that's where storage comes in. Learn the basics or the fundamentals of those things as well. So definitely learn your fundamentals. What could definitely happen is there's not going to be a one size fits all. What I mean in regards to networking, for example, it used to be years ago that the routing protocol of Border Gateway Protocol, BGP, was being taught in your CCNA. So you get a very light touch these days on that. You would have to move into your CCNP to actually get that type of experience. But again, to tell you just get your CCNA, get your CCNP is not going to solve really your question or your problem, because what's going to happen is that generally speaking, BGP is going to be used when it comes to usually internet traffic. It's been adjusted to be able to use in a data center based on a specific design. The actual topology changes as well compared to your enterprise. So this is really where it's going to depend on how involved are you going to be on the networking side. And that's going to be dependent on what type of company you eventually work for or that you're going to be consulting for. And then you want to keep in mind that this is cloud specifics. So networking can help you understand the mechanisms or the features that eventually are going to get rented to you from the cloud provider on how they're supposed to relatively function. And that's where the fundamentals of networking can help you. If you understand the concept, let's say, of BGP route reflectors, which solves a particular scaling issue that we have with BGP, and then you look at mechanisms such as a transit gateway when it comes to Amazon, and every cloud provider has the alternative type of, kind of comparative, but alternative to each other. But once you understand that, and then the scaling mechanisms, it makes it a lot easier to learn what you learn in the cloud, right? From that perspective. So generally speaking, you're just trying to take whatever marketing spin they've done on it, translate it so it makes sense to you. And as a cloud architect, you're of course going to be talking to people, which means this is also going to help you in being able to communicate clearly what it is, this technology that you're, kind of like suggesting to them for a particular business need. Okay, so that's a key. So from that perspective, I would say definitely fundamentals, get them down packed. For many of the students, we do tell them, if you want to like a laid out kind of learning path, the CCNA is very good in that sense. But again, it's not an architecture exam or certification. So you will have to do some things that you will not be able to practically use in your actual day-to-day job, right? You're going to have to learn the basics of how do you bring up a switch? How do you bring up a router? You will learn aspects also, how does that apply to security within the networking environment? So there is certain things that overlap, others not so much. So you just want to keep that in mind. And then we discuss this very much when we have our architecture and design classes for our students, is there's going to be wide area network technologies. Many of them are not going to be covered if you take a fundamentals course or exam like the CCNA. So depending on who you work for, there is a little bit of a learning curve that you'll have to get, maybe dive a little bit more into the service provider aspect, where you might have to learn a little bit about what is MPLS, for example, multi-protocol label switching. You'll have to learn the basics of it, not because you want to actually build it, but you want to understand in what use case this would be an applicable tool that you can suggest to your customers. Because if you need something like a direct connection or like a private kind of line that has a guaranteed performance, this might be a good option for you. You might have to learn other things such as in regards to what overlay networking means. So these, again, they're not fundamentals in the sense of when you take like a CCNA, but understanding that we can have the physical infrastructure, and on top of this physical infrastructure, well, we can actually build a virtual network. So you think about that idea. You literally build an entire city on top of an entire city. It is quite fascinating how that is done. It can get very exciting. But what's really cool about this type of technology is when you look at it from the depth from a cloud architect is that it really makes you think as to why you would ever use it. You know, aside from the idea that the cloud service providers, of course, use it because it allows them to scale. But there's these little itty-bitty things that you can't just get from a certification. And that's why we generally say, get your fundamentals to like a CCNA. If you're part of our program, we are going to help you understand how you can move through those phases so that you can be well-rounded in your understanding. But don't be mistaken. You will have to do reading. You will have to do the work. You will have to do some auxiliary work to figure this out because we can't 100% cover everything that you might see at your job. And that's only because organizations are living, breathing things. They're made up of human beings, right? So there's this in these unknowns at times that can come about that you just can't calculate with it. But definitely fundamentals in all aspects, especially networking. And I think Mike will agree with this with me. 9 out of 10 times, people are scared of networking. Yes. If you can have great fundamentals in networking, now from a branding and a marketing perspective, it sets you also apart. So start with the fundamentals and then look, do you want to be known as a cloud architect that is strong in networking? Or perhaps you are a cloud architect and the entity that you work for requires strong networking knowledge, right? And then you can upgrade from that. Aside from that, focus on fundamentals of tech and then build up your business acumen. But aside from that, fundamentals. I go back to this, fundamentals, fundamentals, fundamentals. Great question, Klaus.
Yeah, and it's a journey.
Yep.
And that's the key to remember. So we spent about 900 hours training our students, which is a lot. It's at least 10 times more than anyone else would do. But even that, as Mark said, that's 900 hours of training. No one's an expert until they have 10,000 hours working in just one thing. So an expert is just working in one side of networking after 5 years minimum. So it's going to be a lifelong journey and it's exciting. But when your fundamentals are good, Cloud Doctor, and this is for everyone that's here, everything else becomes easy. And here's the other secret. Very little actually changes in technology. In 1998, it was the first time I put IPsec over a private line. Amazon just announced that as a new feature last year that it's now supported. If we look at the original cloud computing, it came out in the 1970s with IBM time sharing their mainframes. If we look at the original virtual machine, which is the basis of all cloud computing, VMware invented it in 1999. So it's just a new iteration of the same thing. So when your fundamentals are good, Cloud Doctor, then you'll be able to do things that are going to be there. Then you'll be able to do whatever you want. Yeah.
And for everybody, when we speak fundamentals, you want to think of fundamentals as your foundation. So if you go back to building, to build a good building, you need a great foundation so that you can keep adding to it. And it's going to be the same thing here. If you focus on building a good fundamentals, good foundation, being able to add the other things that you need to learn on top of that is going to be a whole lot easier than when you skip this crucial step of building up your fundamentals and then trying to do it retroactively. You're going to run into a lot of issues if you do it the other way around because it just becomes too overwhelming. And like Mike said, we all still are learning. I mean, there's stuff, Mike's been dealing with BGP for, gosh, what's been like 25, 30 years?
25, almost 26 years now.
Yeah. And look at this. We can and he can still pick up something from BGP these days, and he'll learn something new, or he'll clarify something he already knew. So it's the same for me. It's always an ongoing process, but because we've built foundations that we can tag on this knowledge on, it makes it a lot easier to stay up to date as well. So.
Yeah. And Tyrone, there's one question asked by a Sandy. It's the one that says, is CCNA only theory sufficient enough? That one is a critical question, and I want to answer it in case other people can't stay, because this is one of the most important things in architecture. So Sandy, architects don't configure. Architects to design. And in order to design, you don't need to know how to configure something. You need to know how it works. And let me give you some examples, because this is where everyone goes wrong when they try to be an architect. They do hundreds of hands-on projects, and then they go on an interview and they get asked an architecture question. For example, how would you design for 99.999% availability because the organization has mission critical needs? They have patient records. They do experimental robotic surgery on side of their systems. And they're also a magnet center where people come in all over the world. This system needs to run all the time. The system needs performance requirements of 1,000 cores and 80 terabytes of DRAM. There's also 4 petabytes of data. So that's an architecture needs to think about, how do I design that? And if you swung a hammer all day building houses, you wouldn't know that. And if you configured things all day long, you still wouldn't know that. So architecture is 100% theory. It's not understanding how the protocols work. So let's say I would teach you the following command, Sandy. This is a CCNP level thing, because the CCNA level knowledge is not enough. If I typed on a router, and here's how you would turn on BGP. Mark can correct me because I haven't been an engineer for a while. I'm an architect. Router BGP 65312. Neighbor 192.168, remote AS 65313, neighbor 192.168. What was the last number? I can't remember the one that I just used. .2, activate. Poof, BGP is up and running. But when that happened, and that open message was sent, when those two established their session, and then it went to open, confirm, and then they went to established, and they started exchanging routes. And all those routes came in via BGP, and now they're in the back of my iBGP systems. How does that affect the user in Japan that's trying to sell a product and accessing our systems remotely? How does that affect the voice systems that are in New York City? How does that affect a remote access user in Sao Paulo, Brazil? And those BGP commands can literally change the entire thing and take down the entire network. So you're going to have to learn these at the protocol level. You're going to have to understand how those protocol works. You're going to have to understand how the technology works. And then you'll be in a position to design it. Quite frankly, and I have no problem you doing labs, and I have my students do labs. I actually have my students build a cloud, because other people think they're going to learn the cloud by configuring S3 bucket, and at least my students create a cloud from scratch so they know what a cloud is. But at the end of the day, it's got to be theory, 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 theory. You can do as many labs as you want. And I love that. And it makes you feel good. And it shows you that you can build it, which is not what we do as architects. But still, it's fine. It's good. It's a learning experience. But the knowledge of these has to come via all conceptual and theory. Because now you're going to have to design an architecture or a blueprint for a business that may have 1 million employees, that may be doing $100 billion of revenue, that may have legal requirements in 15 different countries at the same time of where the data needs to be. And you learn that by training in architecture and by training in design and by learning how systems work. That's why the people that design airplanes aren't the people that fix the engines, even though the people that fix the engines know a lot about the plane. It's the same reason they don't hire construction workers who know all about building to be the designer of a skyscraper or the designer of a bridge. It's an architect. It's a completely different way of thinking. I love that you asked that question, and I hope I answered it in a way that's going to help you, Sandy. I want to invite you to the How to Get Your First Cloud Job webinar tomorrow night. I'd love you to be there. And I will literally go over everything we do in the role. And come off mute. We can talk anything we can. So I'd love to invite you. I hope I answered your question there.
And I wanted to add something to this. Number one, just like Mike said, Sandy, these are the type of questions that you should be asking yourself and that you should be asking us, because it shows that you're trying to gain clarity now that you have some direction, right? Somewhere to view your viewpoint. So I have a little bit different train of thought, and not completely different, but Sometimes my engineering brain kind of just switches on and says like, hey, I got to stick up for my fellow engineers here. Number one, when it comes to just getting started, is the CCNA enough? Yes, to get started. Because the important part here is once you finished your CCNA, you don't want to fall into this trap that many of us has fallen into. When we finished the CCNA, we were like, oh my goodness, I am a networking king. Then the next thing you know, you're like, I'm this good, I'm going to go for my CCNP. Feels like you just get slapped in the face. And you're like, whoa, what do you mean? I'm not as good as I thought I am? No, not exactly. And then you decide, you know what? I somehow managed to progress and get my CCNP. I'm really going to go bonkers. I'm going to get my CCIE. And that's really where you get just chopped down, because that's really where you learn how little you do know. So I want you to keep in mind, to get started, yes, the CCNA enough. But I want you to mentally already be prepared that there's always more that you can learn to be a better architect. Now, when it comes to the CCNA, this is what I would say. And everybody needs to understand that. The CCNA, the CCNP, the CCIE, it doesn't matter if you get the the Juniper JNCIE, or if you get Arista, whatever other certifications when you get from the perspective of networking. They're all going to be geared towards what we call operational roles, meaning you're going to be building, you're going to be supporting the type of technology that's going to be basically implemented, right? And you, depending on your seniority and so forth, you actually might be part of the actual implementation of this technology instead of just the operations, or let's say the support. So from that perspective, you will need to know how to implement these things if you want to pass the exam. Now, this is where I caution everybody. I want to say, keep going for it, because it's going to make you a better IT professional in general. But what you need to understand, you need to shift your mindset once you've done the exam towards a mindset of an architect or a designer, meaning, how do I actually apply what I just learned? Not from the perspective of, you know what, I really enjoy BGP. And anyone who I meet now, guess what? You will have to run BGP. Rather, you want to know, do they really need BGP?
Yeah.
And then you have to ask yourself another question. How do you determine if somebody needs something specifically? Well, easy, right? We ask questions. But the need is not going to be based on, is the technology cool? Do you know it? Do they have people that just can operate it? There's time and place for that. But really what it comes down to, and this is where your mind really has to change, is what does the business need? What is the business goal? How can we maximize to get the business there? Sometimes, you know what, it's just you improving a performance, just improving the metrics for that company to make them more efficient. And that's going to be the big difference between looking at something that's going to be based on these examinations where you'll have to really know how to configure it compared to what you'd actually do on the job. Now, we tell the students a lot too. If some can just read, generally, they can just read and it just sticks in their brain. The way they come up with these images that helps them remember these things. I mean, some people are really good at that. Most mortal people, what they'll have to do is they'll have to engage more senses. And this is generally our body. The more senses we engage in something, the more our focus narrows. Basically meaning we're going to this idea of a flow state. We concentrate a lot harder. It makes it easier for us to pick up the concepts. So that is what I recommend, is when you're doing CCNA, CCNP, whatever you may want to be doing, engage as many facilities of yours as possible. If you read, then write to clarify it. Go back, lab it. What broke, what didn't break? Why did it break? How is it supposed to work? How does it not look when it not works? A little hint, not just us network engineers need to understand what the baseline is of a network and what it's not supposed to look like. This is also crucial for architects. When you go and meet with a customer, you want to understand how the company looks like when it functions relatively normal, so that when it goes awry, at least you know what the difference is, right? Because you may have to architect a solution or design a solution that kind of alleviates these issues that have been happening with the network. Or in your case, if you want, let's do cloud networking or cloud architecture on how we can optimize the interactions. And that's also something very important when it comes to architects. A lot of our work is between those intersections of things. So what I mean with that is we have flow of data, we have time. how to use something that is designed, right? If you think of a building, how is the building going to be used now and in the future? What type of people are going to be in this building? Then other aspects are actually going to be, how do you optimize for future use? Then you have the people in general. What type of people will be there? What experience will there be? So a lot of that is not tech-based, right? We're in between these phases. We're basically the coordinators of these different systems, if you want to think of them. And we go between C-suite to architects, to engineers, to just janitor if we have to, depending on what processes and processes we want to optimize. So it's in between those intersections as they're interlocked that we do most of our work. So I know it's a bit long-winded answer to your question, but I just want you to understand that it's okay to go for something like a CCNA, CCNP, something more engineering-based, but just shift your mindset towards the business. And if you can do that, you will be very, very successful as a cloud architect. Wonderful question.
Absolutely, and that's true. And, you know, Mark mentioned something about the CCI. It's a good place to get started. I agree with him completely on it, but I want to talk about the state of the world right now and different roles. So there used to be, and this is pretty important, a lot of roles for intro-level people, the rack and stack people, the people that would install the operating system on your computer, the people that would just go to the router and type config T and turn on an interface and just add it to the routing protocol with a script they were given. There used to be a need to bring in a cloud admin to go configure these systems. There's not anymore. And here's why. With automation, one DevOps engineer, either in networking or the cloud, could do what 30 of those admins used to do. AI can even generate these scripts that the DevOps engineers and others, where they can literally tune these things in a matter of minutes and do things that would normally take people hours to do. So you can easily get a non-entry level job, easily. My first job was a senior engineer, for example. Al Legister was the first tech job out of our program, was a senior solution architect over at Deloitte. You know, got multiple architects hired at Amazon that never worked in tech, like Yvonne Tamba, for example, or Jordan Kittico or Coyote. And I could go through examples at any company you can think of. So you can get a non-entry level job like an architect or a senior engineer as your first job, if you have good, strong skills and everything Mark also told you. But if you just have entry-level skills because you want to apply for that entry-level job, there's not a lot of them now, and I don't see a lot of them coming anytime in the near future. So my recommendation is always go one step higher than you think you need, and that way you're at a level where the rest of the people aren't playing, and there's almost no competition at the level where people are really, really, really good. And then when you're new and you go on an interview and somebody else has 10 years experience, but they're spread so thin and they haven't gone very far, and you've got a lot of deep knowledge, and you add that with energy, enthusiasm, and passion for the work, and you go in there and you show them you're a good team player and you're willing to go above and beyond, you can get that big job as your first job. So I like to say go one level more than you think you need, because you can do 10 times more than you think you can. I bet you could do 20 times more than you think you can. And one good year, 6 to 12 months of the right training, and you can have a brand new career as an architect somewhere. So hope that makes sense. Let's bring in the next question.
Yep. So we got a three-parter from LinkedIn. So I'm going to read the first part, Mike, and then we'll go on to the next one, okay? So this is from Share. They're asking, banking everything on one cloud provider and trying to solve every problem like storage, content delivery network, artificial intelligence, security from one cloud provider. Is this the right strategy?
So we have to understand the organization's business needs and how dependent that organization is on technology and how critical uptime is for that business. And what kind of agility that organization needs moving forward, and understand all their goals before we can design an architecture. I would tell you that, and generally speaking, if you got an organization that has mission critical technology needs, putting them on one cloud, no matter how many availability zones and regions you use, is creating a single architect. You're architecting a single point of failure in your system, which I don't recommend, because let's say you're in a single cloud, they've got a control plane failure, they get hacked, they've got a routing mishap. can take down the entire cloud. So I wouldn't do that. The second thing is you don't really want to put all your eggs in one basket. And I'd rather negotiate with 2 different providers and have them negotiate each other to get better things. And when I don't go single cloud, I'm not tempted to take these little proprietary enhancements that you get on a cloud, and I'm tempted to use the better product anyway. I'd rather, if there's budget for it, use the Oracle database than an Amazon Aurora. First, Oracle runs on all clouds, plus Oracle are the database experts. Same thing, I'd probably be more likely to use Apache Cassandra or MongoDB than a Google Cloud Bigtable, Microsoft Cosmos, or a DynamoDB. I'd rather use the big one from the people that are there, because that way it's going to work and it's going to be there. And it's kind of like a Swiss Army knife versus a perfect built steak knife when you want to eat a steak. You know, I want something that's purpose built, and these providers that are there. Plus, each provider does have their strengths and weaknesses. And by limiting yourself to a single company, you're getting yourself into a position where you're not using the best there actually is. And the reality is, for most organizations, they're going to get the best performance at the lowest cost in their private cloud for workloads that have to run hard 24 hours a day. And they're going to get the best agility from the public clouds and bursting to the public clouds and leveraging some of what they have, like incredible amount of GPU capacity right now. So generally speaking, single cloud's probably not the best approach, but without understanding of the business requirements, it's impossible to say.
The answer is always going to be, it depends, right, Mike? That's really what the
absolutely always.
Yeah, because I've had these discussions with customers too in the past when the question generally came up. Just because I have a wide area network connection and I'm connecting up to my service provider, does that mean I have to use BGP as a routing protocol? And the answer was always, well, it depends, because you can have 2 service providers and still not have to use BGP.
Yep.
So the same like with this whole cloud business, right? If you're just looking at every so time, you just have bursty traffic, right? You're just trying to scale up when necessarily in the cloud. Do you really need the complexity that a multi-cloud environment would bring to you? Not if you're doing it once or twice a year, right? It probably wouldn't be very economical. And again, this is something very important, and architects keep this always in mind, is you always need somebody to support this type of design or infrastructure, right? So again, do you have the people capable of supporting this if you're gonna bring out this design? So unfortunately, the question is always gonna be, it depends on what the business need is. So you'll always have to ask more clarifying questions and try to see if going wider, so in a sense, more cloud service providers is really required for what the company is trying to accomplish. So, and also on that subject, they do have a follow-up question, Mike. Okay. I think you'll enjoy this one because, Mike loves input and outputs. You'll see this. They're wondering, when it comes to performance in the cloud, is there any match with on-premises, like the input and output performance, bare metal server speeds, and as well as low latency network?
Well, no, they'll get close, and I'll tell you some of the workarounds you can do in the public cloud. But no, I can go to my data center and I can buy a 19 million IOPS RAID card, and maybe I spend $300,000 or $400,000 on that card. But to equal that performance in the cloud, I'd probably spend $50 million. So, it's cheap by comparison. So in my data center, I can run any network links I want. I can make sure my network is not oversubscribed. All cloud providers are oversubscribed, meaning they sell more capacity than they have, but it usually works because most people don't use 100% of their capacity. So it statistically works. You can prioritize any traffic you want in your data center. And when you run on bare metal, it typically gives you an additional 5% performance as well. So the data center is always going to perform your best if it's properly designed and you got good networking people. Because if you don't have the good networking people, it's going to fall apart, and you need good security people as well. So you're going to get better performance in the network. Storage performance is going to be better. You're not going to have the latency in terms of a millisecond or 2 to reach your systems that are in the public cloud. You have complete control of your storage infrastructure. You've got complete control of your virtual machines or physical machines. So the ultimate performance will always be in your data center. And quite frankly, the data center spending is coming back. But I would say if we're going to the data center, in most cases in today's world, it makes sense to use something like a Nutanix cloud or an OpenStack cloud, because that gives us, the functions as a service and all that cloud native computing. It's a beautiful control plane to push our systems wherever they need to be. And I think there's a lot of value in that. Plus, these systems enable the automatic, okay, you're getting close to your capacity, auto scale out to the cloud. So your cost can be typically the least, and you will get the best performance. But does the organization want to manage it? Usually it's cheaper, total cost of ownership. But, does the organization have the sophistication? Can they get the people? Is power even available to bring in, or cooling and things like that?
Yeah, so I generally look at this from this perspective. When the cloud service providers build out their infrastructure, which eventually they're going to rent or lease to you based on your need, they're going to be designing it in a way that allows them the most return on their investment, meaning they're going to bring up features, architectural designs, applications that they believe are going to be the most marketable. So it is more of think of like a cookie cutter kind of template that they predominantly give, and then over time, depending on how their business grows, what type of demand different customers will have, they might release different type of services and features. Mike mentioned IP version 6, for example. There seems to have not been much of a need about 10 years ago in the cloud. So they decided 10 years later, we have a lot more people, a lot more devices. They probably had in the back end some customers that required this prior. So those were their use cases. They built it out. It was a custom built design. You can think of it that way. And then they ended up figuring out more people need it, and it was financially viable for them to market it and lease it to you. So that's one aspect of cloud providers. If you're large enough, think of it like a governmental entity, then you might qualify for somebody like an Amazon, like a Google Cloud, like a Microsoft Azure, or let's say Oracle, that they can actually build your purpose-built network, right? So they'll build your purpose-built cloud that's going to function based on their infrastructure, but it's going to be tailored to your needs. Now, many of us are not the size of actual governmental entities or national security agency or any of these things, right? So we might not get that preferential treatment. So from that perspective, it is very logical that we can actually conclude having control of the infrastructure, the routers, the switches, the firewalls, the load balancers, the type of storage medium we're going to be using. Is it going to be fiber channel? Is it going to be iSCSI? Do you want to block against file storage? In our data center, we now control all those different aspects, right? All these little nerd knobs that we can turn that we had obfuscated or hidden from us when it came to the cloud service providers. Now, cloud service providers, of course, have storage networks, they got compute and all that. But the underlying on how this all is put together, what you can get from that is cookie cutter, right? It's for the masses. Internally, do whatever your heart desires. You want low latency? Guess what? You can specifically spend your money on low latency switches. You can do that. Those switches are going to have a much faster backplane. You can do that as well. How the data flows in and out of your data center, you can control that as well. You can gear that based on what type of people you have working for the entity. So you have the key really is control. You have so much more control over how and what you're going to build compared to going out there and taking something off the shelf. Now, there are some, of course, shortcomings of that approach too. Mike mentioned one of them. You generally need the capital, right? It's going to be a capital expense to get the type of hardware you need. Then there's going to be a capital and operational expense because you're going to probably have to get the people that know what they're doing, right? To actually bring up this type of infrastructure, to manage it, to support it. So there's those caveats with it. And then, of course, is it convenient to build everything out from scratch if you need to, or run it yourself? Not necessarily. It's not always as convenient as a cloud. But then there's always trade-offs, regardless if you do an on-premise type of data center or if you're going to do a cloud data center. So again, it's really going to be dependent on what the use case is. But 100%, if you put it together, you design it, you build it, you own the infrastructure, you're always going to have more control over it than when I'm leasing it from somebody. Very simple analogy, if you all want to think about this, when you purchase your home and you own it, let's say you have that luxury these days to own your home, you can decide what paint I want on the wall. You can decide what kind of screens do I want. Want to change your windows? Change your windows. If you're renting a home, an apartment, a condominium, a luxury suite, whatever it may be, even if you go and you stay in a hotel, you have absolutely 0.1 control over what you can change and what you can do. You're within the confines of whoever basically provided you that type of service or feature at that moment in time. You want to paint your wall in an apartment, you got to get permission. Sometimes you can't even hang up a picture, right? A nail. Otherwise, you got to cover it or paint it back. So again, like common sense things that we see around the world, same applies when it comes to technology. So great question.
Yeah, and I forgot to answer the second side of it. There are things you can do. So for example, storage performance, which is lacking on the cloud because block storage is nowhere close to as fast as, say, the NVMe RAID arrays that would be in a server. There's this concept of this Lustre file system that you can use in Amazon. And there's a NetApp actually works with Amazon FSx for Lustre to create pseudo block storage out of that. So there are things you can do to use in the cloud to boost your performance, cluster placement groups, etc., using some of the local edge type environment data centers. So the things you can do to get it closer to your data center, but it's your custom thing versus something that you're getting from someone else.
Yeah. It's like that. You can buy a software from a vendor. You work within the confines of that. If you can code your own program, you can do whatever you want, right? Yep. Same type of analogy, same type of idea. The final part of their question, Mike, was in a multi-cloud environment, is there any best practices to follow? The reason I ask is that each cloud provider has their own well-architected framework, and thus it can get a little bit confusing if there are just some general best practices that they can follow.
Okay, that is an incredible question. So let's go through this. First, in this case, you're just going to throw away the well-architected frameworks. So let's talk about, say, a TOGAF framework versus a well-architected framework. And we'll still look at certain components of the well-architected framework. So TOGAF is, or enterprise architecture frameworks are designed to make sure your clients are successful. What if I told you that 70% of all architectures are disasters? What do I mean by a disaster? Organizations spend a lot of money on the technology and it does nothing for their business. So it's just wasted. And if an organization is wasting its money on tech, they can't be investing in its people, its processes, or other things that will make the business better. So it's hurting the company. So 70% of architectures, according to McKinsey, are failures. More than 50% of cloud architectures are disasters. It was recently published in CIO magazine. They called them abject failures. And it's the same way. And why is that? If you look at what's taught in a certification is the name of a service and how to configure that service. If you look at a well-architected framework is how do you lay out the stuff to work in our cloud, which is actually still good, and I'll tell you they're there, but it's based on how do we make the tech work? Now, why do most projects fail? Why do most architectures fail? Because the people didn't focus on how they make the business work. They focused on how they make the tech work. So that's how you destroy your clients, and that's how you destroy your name as an architect, by not delivering good business results. If you're going to invest in money, you want a return on your investment. When a business invests in an architecture, they want some form of business improvement, which is why they're going to you. So you use something more like a TOGAF framework that'll say, look, let's start with the executives and the vision for the business. Where does that business want to be 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now, 12 months from now, which you should be doing anyway. And then you look at the organization's business architecture. How is the organization structured? What are the business processes that make this business work? And then you work with that organization to re-architect those business processes to get them to their business goals. And then you look at the organization's data and see what kind of data they have, what's working, and then look at their business goals in the future and say, what changes do we need to make in our data environment to get to those results? Then you look at their network and you look at their compute and you look at their storage and you look at their applications and say, okay, this is what we've got. Now, these are the future business goals. These are the future business processes. Let's go design for that. And then you actually have to go determine the organization's readiness for change. You need to document these architectures, create a statement of work, create a governance structure. That's architecture, which is what we architects are doing. It's not like we're going to be configuring things or hands-on. There's no DevOps. There's no coding and architect work. So, that's what we're doing. So we adopt that. And, a cloud architect, because cloud architects are multi-cloud, where a solution architect is someone that works for a vendor to sell a vendor's technology in the architecture department. We constantly have to go work with those vendors and get their guidance and say, okay, you know, Microsoft, what do you think? Google, what do you think? AWS, what do you think? Cisco, what do you think? IBM, what do you think? Nutanix, Palo Alto, and you're going to meet with all those vendors and you're going to get their guidance. Because when it's going to be an architecture like this, it's big and everybody wants a piece of it, so they're going to happily give you resources. And then you're going to evaluate all the trade-offs between the varying technologies, and then you'll pick the best technologies that are going to work. Now, some more best practices to make multi-cloud architecture work. If a cloud provider made it as a proprietary thing, just don't use it. And you're going to get better anyway. Who do you think would have better routing code? Cisco or some cloud provider that's trying to replicate what Cisco's done for the last 40 years? Cisco's going to have better routing code. The cloud providers has to do everything, but Cisco specialized in routing code. Now you need a next generation firewall. You could use like an AWS WAF, which is not really a next generation firewall, and you can integrate it into somebody else's signature-based next generation effects. Or you can go to Palo Alto that's got a firewall that can recognize patterns of behavior that are abnormal and stop it in its tracks. But again, Palo Alto's sole focus is security. A company like Amazon or Microsoft or Google is in 80 billion different businesses trying to create every possible feature, so they can't focus on it. So what you're going to do is not use a DynamoDB. You'll replace it with a MongoDB or Apache Cassandra, which in most cases is a better product, could be a better product anyway, but you don't know if it's a better product or not without evaluating your client's needs. But use Kubernetes. Now, don't use an Amazon Kubernetes managed variant or a Microsoft Kubernetes variant or a Google Kubernetes variant. Run a real Kubernetes cluster or OpenStack, which runs on all. And that way, if one of your clouds goes down, everything still is going to be good for you. So that's something that you kind of do. So keep that in the back of your mind. Pick the best technologies and try to stay from anything vendor. So Kubernetes replaces an ECS. Oracle replaces an Amazon Aurora. You do that, you're going to probably get the best product, and it's going to work on all your clouds. And if anything happens in one of your clouds or one of your cloud providers raises their rate, no big deal. You can go anywhere else, and you can always negotiate each cloud provider against each other for better pricing.
Great follow-up, Mike. Let's go on to the next question, Tyrone, please. All right. So this question is from Tommy J. They're wondering, what would qualify someone as a multi-cloud architect? Is it their ability to have a good measure of understanding of two different public cloud providers, services, and set up some or other skills?
That is a great question, so Tommy. So here's what makes a great multi-cloud architect. Someone that can improve their client's business performance. Here's what makes a bad architect. Someone that can make the tech work, but the customer spent money and got nothing out of it. So the first thing is to really ask your clients when they come to you and say, we desire to implement an architecture on this. We ask them, what is your end goal? How would you define success? Because if I don't know the client's end goal and I don't know what they consider to be successful, what am I doing? Sticking virtual machines and containers in the organization and not even knowing why. So I need to know the goal. It's the same thing that a doctor would need. A patient comes in and it's just a routine visit. It's either what brings you in today, okay, I have a sore throat, or I'm worried about my health. I need to talk to you about how do I stay healthy. But you need to know why they're coming in for that day. And when someone approaches you as an architect and an architect as a consultant, we need to know what their business goal is. So, and I want you to come to our webinar tomorrow night. So what makes a good architect? A good architect that can go to the C-suite and understand the C-suite's business needs. And in order to do that, you need to have a good amount of business knowledge or business acumen. Of course, we teach this in our architecture program. And you also need to understand what CEOs care about. Because if you walk into the CEO's room and talk to them about their BGP, security will escort you out of the room. You'll be fired from your job, and you're going to be looking for something else. But if you understand that CEO is concerned about how do I increase my revenue, how do we get the stock price up, how do we drive operational efficiency, where can we pull costs out to improve bottom line or net income, now you're in a position where you can help your clients be more successful. The next phase of it is you're going to have great communication skills. I'll get to the tech skills in a minute, but Tommy J, I'm doing this because 99% of the people prepare for engineering jobs by learning a bunch of labs, learning the code, learning Python, learning Linux, learning Terraform. And then when they go to an architect interview and they don't have any of the skills of an architect, because we don't do any of that in our jobs. So the next thing that you need to understand is how to get the client's requirements and really pull. And you're going to have to go through various department heads, various leaders, and frontline workers. And that's going to take stellar communication skills. It's going to take a lot of emotional intelligence, especially because most of your clients' architectures previously failed. Remember, 70% do. And there's people that made a lot of mistakes, so they don't want to give you information. So you're going to need a soft touch, a lot of finesse, and a lot of emotional intelligence. Now, once we get past that, when it comes into getting the requirements and designing the architecture, Tommy, you're not going to be doing it. It's not going to be like in any kind of Udemy video that's related to a certification. You're going to now have to build a team of people. You know, if you have followed David Lithicum, and he's a good friend of ours, and he teaches our AI architect course. He was Deloitte's head of cloud strategies, so chief cloud architect. And if you listen to any of the things that I would tell you what we need to do, every architecture we work on takes a team of 12 to 50 people and 6 to 12 months. And if you're going to be that multi-cloud lead architect, and that's the role, you're going to have to be able to build a team of people, which will include solution architects or from your various vendors, DevOps engineers, cloud engineers, because they know the tech better than we do because they're focused on the tech and we're focused on the business. You're going to need network architects, security architects, IAM architects, and you're going to need a lot software developers. You're going to need them all on your team. So you're going to have to lead that team. And then when this is done, you're going to have to document the architecture, present it back to key stakeholders, the organization's tech people and their executives. You're going to have to sell and close the deal along with the account team, and you're going to have to do a lot of negotiation. So if you don't know how to do that, you won't be able to get any of these jobs. And that's why we retrain people from everyone else's boot camps, because they teach them the name of a service, how to configure Linux and Python. And then you go on an architect job and they ask you, for example, how would you design your demilitarized zone to protect against whatever? Or they're going to be asking you a question and saying, our organization's weighted average cost of capital is 6.73%. How do you evaluate that information to determine whether we should design and build a private cloud leveraging versus a public cloud? Or they're going to say, oh, we're an airline and we have increased fuel costs, and you need to be able to think, okay, how do airlines buy fuel? They purchase, they hedge by buying options. Can we use maybe artificial intelligence to figure out how to mine through the data and determine the best time to buy an option on fuel? So your brain needs to be focused on that. So if you're focused on that and you have those skills, you will be an awesome architect. And you have to have them. And we teach them obviously to our architect users. The next thing to do is understanding how to design systems. Here's the good news, Tommy. You know, if you wanted to buy eggs, you'd go to the supermarket. Does it matter which supermarket you buy your eggs from? I live in Florida. There's a Winn-Dixie, there's a Publix, and there's some place called an Aldi. I can get eggs at all three. If you go to the cloud computing and you really learn the cloud, not a certification, but really learn the cloud, you'll realize that it's a network and a data center. So we may have a virtual machine sitting in VMware in our data center, or Citrix Zen, or Linux KVM. When we go to the cloud and we need a virtual machine, with AWS, we use an EC2 one. With Azure, they call it an Azure virtual machine. Google calls it a compute engine instance, but it's the identical technology. So you need to decide how you would use your virtual machines, how to size them, CPU, DRAM, network performance, etc. But it's the same thing on every cloud. So it's not like you're learning anything. It's just like, which store do you buy your eggs at? Especially multi-cloud, we're not going to use any of the cloud providers' proprietary stuff anyway. So you need to think about that. Okay, I need object storage. Okay, we've got object storage in our data center. I could buy it from Dell EMC. I can get AWS S3. It's object storage. Google calls it cloud storage. Azure calls it blob, but it's the same thing. So I need a direct connection or a private line. Mark and I called it a private line for the last 30 years. AWS made up the name direct connection. Azure called it express route. Google called it a direct interconnect. It's the same thing. So if you've got the business skills to be able to design to understand what the client needs, and you've got the networking and the data center skills, you are unstoppable. So what do you need to really understand? You need to understand virtualization. That means virtual machines. That means containers and container orchestration. It means you need to know the storage area and networks, block storage, object storage, file storage, if you will. It means you need to know load balancers, forward proxies, reverse proxies, because you're going to be dealing with them. It means you need to know databases and the types of databases and how they work. It means you need to understand firewalls and IDS IPS systems and VPN concentrators and packet filters. And it means you need to know networking. Things like BGP, IP addressing, subnetting, supernetting. And if you understand all those concepts, for the most part, you can design any architecture on any multi-cloud environment you really want. But it's how the technology works and how you put it together. The reason they don't let architects actually touch the technology, and even with the proof of concept, we lead a team of engineers that do it, is our focus must be on the business. When we start thinking about the technology and dive deep, we're no longer able to focus on the business. So that's why this is a business executive role. And that's why we're so successful at getting people hired. And that's why most people fail, which is why we do these. They learn to code, they learn DevOps, they learn maintenance, which is SysOps. They learn all these other things which aren't related to the job. And then someone says, how do you design for this? The person doesn't know. Or when we finish an architect interview, it's a presentation to a panel of people. And the person spoke all their time learning the code, which we don't do. And they don't know how to give a presentation to a panel of people. So, Tommy, I hope I asked your questions. I'm going to invite you to How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar. I'm also going to invite you to our free AWS training. The link for that is in the description and as well as the chat. And please ask more. Really want to help.
Yeah. Tommy, Mike really hit the nail on the head. Come join us tomorrow. You'll get a little bit more, I say a little bit kindly, but a lot more information when we can get on Zoom with you. But I wanted to give you this little scenario. I kind of was dipping my toe between architecture and engineering because my job role demanded it of me. And I kind of also came through this idea that automation started to gain traction. Now, automation, again, nothing new. We've been doing automation within the data center for years and years and years because that really was the only feasible way of managing such a scale of a network and the applications, the service, and everything that came with it. But when this idea of automation came within to what we call the enterprise realm, a lot of engineers and architects as well, even though architects don't necessarily do the automation, but the concept of it really resonated with them. And you'll learn it, you know in a minute why that is. But among the engineers, there always was this thing, why do I have to learn automation? Why do I have to learn programming? Why do I have to learn these things? I totally understood them. I didn't think there was very much need to learn automation for this one specific reason. How can you automate anything that you do not understand?
Yep.
Right? And again, I understand that there's really good scripting programs, there's programming languages, right? A lot of them are, you can almost say click and point, some of them, especially within the cloud environment, that kind of bring up the automation system for you. But what if BGP doesn't behave the way it should? What if something goes wrong with my storage switch and the way it views itself when using fiber channel over Ethernet, right? In those type of scenarios, you can know as much programming as you want. You can know how to clickety-clack all the buttons.
Yep.
But if you don't understand the protocol that is being used to facilitate the flow of data, how are you going to fix it? So that is the question I posed. And this is also a question that over the years has come within the community itself, that automation is great, but how do we go about doing it if we don't understand how the protocols work? So it's the same with cloud architecture. You'll have to understand the product from an architecture point of view. You have to understand the product. In this case, what is the product that we're really selling, designing, presenting? It is the cloud. If we're going to do it across multiple cloud providers, does it not seem logical then that you would have to know and have some understanding about the product if you're going to try to sell it to somebody, if you're going to try to recommend somebody that product? Would you trust a auto salesman if you're looking for a car and they know nothing about the car that you're trying to buy? I mean, it doesn't matter how nice this person is, how much you fall in love with them. If they know nothing, meaning their competency is down, you're going to buy from them? I can actually guarantee you that person would be so poor at selling you the solution because they don't understand it that they'll really talk you out of buying it. And that's not. Go ahead, Mike.
I'm going to stop Mark there because he just gave you the insight into another career.
Yep.
So in technology, they have salespeople, the account executives that are very good business people. They understand business. They understand their customers' business pain points, but they have almost no knowledge of the product whatsoever or how the product works. So in all these companies, they either have a solutions architect or a sales engineer, and that person sits side by side with that sales rep. And when the sales rep tries to say, we can do this for you, the sales engineer or solution architect says, no, we can't. We can do this, but not this. And that's what a solutions architect really is. It's a person that works for a vendor, that works directly attached or to a sales team, that when those sales reps go out, they help create the solution or design the solution that the people are going to sell. Now, it will often be a biased solution because they're in the sales team and they're going to push their own products, where a cloud architect works with every vendor, a solution architect works for one company. But that's the reason. That's why the sales engineers have existed for decades. That's why the solutions architects exist. They work for the vendor to help sell the product, because the business person, that sales rep, is taking people to golf games. They're taking them dinners and drinks, which you will be too. They're taking them golfing. They're doing all that relationship stuff and sales stuff. And you're going to give the presentations at the sales meetings, the presentations at the executive briefings, and you're going to go lead that team of the people behind the scenes to go design the product, which is the architecture that you're going to go sell to them.
So you will have to know some of the tech. Let's just put it that way. You can't do nothing if you don't know the tech. I mean, you're not going to be selling them sandwiches. Let's put it that way. Even though they might enjoy it.
You have to know the tech.
You have to know the tech.
Not how to build the tech, how it works and how to design it.
Yeah, you know what? That just brings me, just popped in my mind, just impromptu. I recall working with a customer, and they wanted a different security solution. Now, I'm by no stretch of the imagination a security expert. I never claimed to be, but I'm dangerous enough that I can have these competent and intelligent conversations with customers when it comes to this. And what I don't know, I'll bring in somebody who is an actual subject matter expert. But in this case, all the customer wanted to know that based on these requirements, what are their options? Now, in this case, I didn't need to know all the ins and outs of a solution. I just needed to fit the customer in that moment with a potential solution to what they were trying to do. And if that sounded of interest of them, guess what we did? I gathered more information. I built out the actual idea of what the customer was looking for, the plan, so to speak. And then I went along with this plan, and I went to either my superiors, I went to other architects. Guess what? I also went to the engineers, because I wanted to know, is this really feasible from what they know technically about this particular solution? So you see, in that case, I did not need to know the ins and the outs of something. I just needed to know enough so that I can be a matchmaker, so to say, when it comes to this solution. And then, of course, eventually be able to translate between the different groups. But that's something that an architect will need to know. You need to know a little bit about whatever the solution is. If you, for example, if you're an enterprise architect, you'll need to know a little bit about a lot of things, but really a lot of depth when it comes to business, right? So again, gauge exactly how you're going to be multi-cloud architect. You're going to have 2 clouds, 3 clouds, on-premise, hybrid, multi-cloud. You better know a little bit about all of them, Tommy. But just remember, you are a leader that puts people in touch. You're a matchmaker, yes. You're a coordinator, you're a business executive. So great question, Tommy, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow if you can make it.
Yeah, come to the free webinar.
All right, Tom. Okay, Tommy has a follow-up question. It says, on a given architecture team, what is the relationship and responsibilities of the generic cloud architect in comparison with a solutions architect and a technical architect?
Okay, so it depends where you work, Tommy. So for the most part, you're going to find a cloud architect working for the end client, the global bank, or they're going to work for a big 4 consulting firm like a Deloitte or an Accenture. Or they're going to be at that end client. And the end client, let's say you're a global bank. you're going to need technology. Now, it would be near insane for a global bank to put all their technology in a single cloud, given the bank's legal constraints, regulatory constraints, availability constraints, and cost of downtime. So you've got a bank, and the bank is going to have some workloads that are going to be so latency dependent that they can earn millions more per year by running it in their data center. Because some of that stuff might be where a couple of nanoseconds can actually equal millions of dollars a year, and you can save milliseconds by not using a public cloud. There'll be reasons for that. But so some of that stuff's going to need to go to the data center. Some of that stuff is going to go in, say, 2 different other cloud providers. And there's a lot of stuff that benefits from the cloud, and there's a lot of stuff that's going to benefit from the data center. Now, if you're that global bank, you know that if you call any cloud provider you want, that cloud provider is going to send a solutions architect and account rep that either get commission or get bonuses based upon how much they can sell of the company's own stuff. And they're going to be trained on the company's own stuff. And quite frankly, the solution architect is going to be the expert of the company's own stuff. The solution architect may know when the technology doesn't work the way it's supposed to, because they're told internally, don't design on these things. They're going to know the warts, if you will. Okay, this has got a performance limitation here, but we can hear. So they can provide some expert guidance to the end client. But at the end of the day, they work for that cloud provider or that technology provider. So a solutions architect at AWS designs, presents, and sells AWS solutions. A solutions architect at Microsoft designs, presents, and sells Microsoft solutions. A solutions architect at Cisco designs, presents, and sells Cisco solutions. A solution architect at NVIDIA designs, presents, and sells NVIDIA solutions. So understand that's where the solutions architect is coming. Single provider stuff. And let's talk about what a technical architect is, and then I'll show everything and how it works. A technical architect is really an engineer. There's someone that's been an engineer that knows the tech so much, and you want to pay them a little more, and you don't know what you can do, and you call them a technical architect, and they become design engineers. These are going to be your absolute best technology people in your company, and they're going to be the lowest paid of the architects by far, because the closer you are to the business, the more you will earn, because the more of an impact you can make on that organization's revenue or net income, what have you. And unfortunately, the tech is something that an organization thinks they have to spend their money on. They're concerned about their business. So now that you understand that, your cloud architect, now this is every company except for Amazon, but they have technical architects that they're sort of half between a technical architect and a solution architect, that they made up the name cloud architect. So at AWS, they're more businessy people or solutions architects. But for everybody else, the cloud architect is multi-cloud. So now I work at this global bank, and the bank says, we need some modernization product. I don't know, we're going to build a generative AI training system. So now I'm the lead cloud architect, and I say, okay, this new training system, we're going to need critical network performance. Okay, let's bring in a network architect. We are going to have access to more GPU compute capacity right now on the cloud, and a lot of our data is already in the cloud, and a lot of the pre-made LLMs are already there, and we can set it up easier. So, all right, I'm going to need an AI architect that's going to work with me. I'm going to need a security architect. I'm going to need an IAM architect. Wait, they're all architects. They're not going to know the tech deep enough. Let me bring in some cloud engineers and some technical architects and some DevOps engineers and some developers and all these people. So the cloud architect's going to lead that team. Now they're going to get input from a solution architect from, say, AWS, input from a solution architect from, say, Azure, input from solutions architects at Oracle, and then the cloud architect is going to work with their organization, and they're probably going to issue an RFP and see who can come up with what solution for the cheapest price. And then they'll spend months negotiating it. So as the enterprise architect or the multi-cloud architect, you're focused on that end-to-end everything. And the solution architects will be a consultant to you. And you will consult to your chief information officer who reports to the CEO. So that's typically the way it's going to work in a post-sales environment. Now, there are going to be different levels of architecture roles at your vendor. And here's what I mean. You're going to have some vendors will still have technical architects. Cisco has technical solutions architects, and they also higher level business architects. A technical solutions architect is someone that's really strong on the technology and a solution architect at the same time. It's really a technical architect. That's the go-to person to go design stuff from Cisco. Now, they will also, and they are typically on the sales team, which means they get sales bonuses, sales commissions, because they're on the sales team, which means they are paid and commissioned to go sell the product. Every company does this. It's not wrong. That's why solutions architects are typically a sales position. In some way, shape, or form, they're tied to sales bonus or whatever. Now, if you go to a company like Cisco or Microsoft or IBM, they also have a set of executive architects. They're more that cloud architect-y, enterprise-y architect kind of person, and they typically work in consulting divisions. Microsoft has got a business solutions group. Cisco had the Internet Business Solutions group where I came. And these are executive architects. These are architects that are paid a lot more. These are architects that are not part of the sales team. They're on a corporate bonus. And these are architects that are going to their clients to be what's called trusted advisors, where they're bringing you in as an industry expert. You're having an expert to C-suite conversation. You're sharing your expertise. You're asking what they want to do in the future. So for example, when I had one of these roles, I built a business council of chief information officers. They'd come twice a year and tell me what they were looking for in future products and services. I would speak at industry conferences. I would speak at executive briefings to the company's C-suite. I would speak at global presentations, and I would consult to the world's largest clients, but I wasn't related to sales. So I could go in there and say, nope, this is not the solution for you. The salespeople weren't too happy, but the salespeople were very happy that we'd go in there, we'd talk to the clients and say, I don't think this is right for you. And the clients would say, what do you think is right? And we'd tell them, and they were so happy that they ended up buying more of our end product anyway, because they knew that we would be there, tell them what not to buy versus what to buy. So that's your more executive architect. So technical architect, most technical, lowest pay. Solution architect, nice job, pre-sales, like a sales engineer, but at a higher business level. Cloud architect, responsible for everything. So hope that makes sense. And I showed you the pre-sales version, the corporate version, like if you worked at a vendor, and I gave you the end client version if you worked at, say, a global bank.
All right. Perfect follow-up, Mike. Couldn't have said it better myself. As a matter of fact, I probably couldn't have, except the other parts. But anyway, it was fantastic. I love it. This is why we're here, guys. This is the type of information that is not found in books. It's just simply not. So take advantage of it, ask the questions that you have, gain the clarity, and find the direction that you really want to go. And this is why we're here to do it. Of course, we also provide you with some additional resources that you can take advantage of. Some of them, of course, are going to be free that you can download, use. You can join the webinar. Or, of course, if you want to take the plunge, you always know where to find us when it comes to the Cloud Development Architect program as well, and the other programs that we offer. So anyway, great question, Tom. Really appreciate it. Let's go on to the next question, please, Tyrone.
Sure.
So we got a question from Sandy. Does DevOps tools a must to become, or well, let me start over again. So does DevOps tool a must to become a cloud engineer? Also, is a platform engineer related to a cloud engineer?
A platform engineer, that SRE DevOps, is more related to DevOps than cloud engineering. So let's be fair. These are cloud engineer skills. Now, we used to have a cloud engineering program, and I stopped teaching it, Sandy, and I'm going to tell you why I stopped teaching it, just for your own information. It was a wonderful program. We were getting students hired from it. But a lot of what cloud engineers do, write Python scripts, write Bash shell scripts, write Windows PowerShell scripts, a lot of that work can be done by AI. Internally, if we need a Python script for something, we just ask AI to write it for us. And we don't really use Terraform internally. But if we did, we'd write our Terraform script with AI and we would just tune it. So understand that a lot of what cloud engineers do can be done by AI. Understand that what architects do can never be done by AI because of the human side of what architects do. So please understand, because you asked about engineering and architecture, engineering can be your first job. For example, Pierre Dassault was on sailboats, and then we got him his first solution architect job at Lease Web. Vladimir was a 24-year-old college student. We got him as a solution architect job at North Highland. I mentioned Al Legister, who got his first senior solution architect job after our training at Deloitte. Or Wallace Agana, who was a sales rep who got his first architect job as an enterprise architect at JPMC. Or Jermaine Hafton, who was selling landscaping gear, who we got him his first enterprise architect job at SNHU. Or Balwinder Kerr, who was a stay-at-home mom who got hired at Microsoft. or Lenny Burnett, who was our video editor, who we got hired at our electronics. And I give you many more examples. But the key is you can be an architect too. And since you asked about an engineer as an architect, understand meeting with your client, entertaining your client, learning about their business goals, leading teams. That can't be done by AI. So if you consider AI in your future career, at least know this. So now what do you need to know as a cloud engineer? As a cloud engineer, you are a builder and a tuner. So while the architect is focused on planning and an admin person would be focused on just doing stuff like, initial configuration, an engineer is in that midpoint. The engineer is focused on performance tuning, tech optimization, and building things. So as a cloud engineer, you're going to have to understand infrastructure as code, which is Terraform, because they're going to be building a lot of this stuff. A cloud engineer must understand DevOps tools, because they don't need to be a DevOps engineer, but they need to understand DevOps tools because they're going to play with it a little bit in their career. A cloud engineer needs to know Linux. Now, a cloud architect doesn't need to know these things, but a cloud engineer needs to know Linux, because a cloud engineer is going to be putting systems in, installing applications, and that's going to be done on Linux or Windows. So they need to understand how to get in and out of Windows, whether it be or Linux, user accounts, install programs, patch a kernel, mount a volume or something like that. So our engineers are going to need to do that. Our engineers are going to need to be intimately familiar with the command line interface of whichever cloud providers they're actually working on. Our cloud engineers are going to have to automate. So they're going to need to understand Python and Bash shell scripting and Windows PowerShell scripting. So you can see you've got an architect that's designing, presenting, selling, planning, leading. And you've got an engineer that's got hardcore, deep technical skills. And that's why you need to train for your job. And that's why, I've got people with 15 years cloud engineering experience that I have to retrain to be cloud architect. I've got developers with 20 years development experience, and it has nothing to do with architecture. So we train them all the time and get them great architect jobs. It's the same reason if you took a good cloud architect and then said, do this DevOps thing, they'd look at you like you had 4 heads, because they wouldn't be able to do it, because it's a good skill. It's a strong skill. It's a skill from a different career. Hope I answered your question on that.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, Tyrone, if you could bring up the other portion of Sandy's question, we can touch on it a little bit further. They spell out a bit more of the actual tools of the craft of an engineer. You should see it under Wireshark, Nmap, Nagios, Netstat, and so forth.
So
let's give it. I'm going to read it. Well, there you go. He has it. So he does say, how much skills in tools like Wireshark, Nmap, Nagios, Netstat, etc., are good enough for shooting level tasks in the cloud? So I guess we can approach a little bit from the engineering side and then pivot back to the architecture side.
So Sandy, we first have to define what you mean by troubleshooting. So if you're at an end client, if let's say you're working at a client and you're a cloud engineer and you've got a system that goes down, they're going to call the technical assistance center at your cloud provider, and they're going to call the technical assistance center at your networking provider or your service provider. So understand that unless you are in the support division, you'll still need to do troubleshooting, but troubleshooting like that is not going to be part of your job. There's a tech support team for that. So when are you going to be doing troubleshooting? When you build something and it doesn't work, or when the operations support people can't figure it out, they're going to escalate it to you. So that means you're going to need to have very good troubleshooting skills. But what gives people good troubleshooting skills? And here's the secret: knowing how the technology works. I can remember I was a CCIE and I knew routing and switching real well. I worked with this guy, Ted K. I don't know if Ted finished high school or not. He may or may not have. He was not a guy with a degree. He had absolutely zero certifications. But this guy read every book on Unix, every book on networking protocols, every RFC I've ever seen. And he literally took a sniffer or a protocol analyzer and put it all over the system. And I think he spent 4 hours a day looking at packet captures. the system would break. The technical people, they sent it to us, and they sent it to me as CCIE. And I'm debugging routing protocols, and if it's routing protocol related, I get it. And if it wasn't routing protocol related, I'm like, Ted, and this guy would he would do a packet capture, and he would see exactly what was going on at the packet level, and he would know what to do. Why was this? Because he knew how everything worked. He knew every message that was supposed to be sent, what every header was supposed to look like. This guy knew it all. He was amazing. So the key is you need to understand the tech and the underlying tech. You can have Wireshark and learn how to press start and stop and do a packet capture. But if you don't understand the IP protocol and you don't know what an IP header needs to look like or an Ethernet frame needs to look like or how TCP sets up a connection, it will be 100% meaningless to you. So you have to understand the technology. Everybody wants to go to the tools, but the tools are no good if you don't know how to use them. My wife told me many years ago that I'm no longer allowed to hang a picture in my house. She said, Mike, you can go practice medicine. Mike, I know you've consulted to almost all of the world's largest internet service providers on how to design their network, most of the world's largest banks and most of the world's largest healthcare systems. But every time you try to hang a picture on the wall, the hammer goes through the wall and we need to call a drywall repair person. So Michael, you're not permitted to use a hammer or a screwdriver or a wrench or anything like that, because my wife knows that I know nothing of how to use tools. But when I need to have something designed around my house, I know exactly how to draw a blueprint for someone else to build it for me, because I understand architecture and I understand the principles. So the key is, yes, you will need to understand things like Wireshark. If you're in security or you're going to be dealing with ACLs and things that are funny, and you want to see what's being blocked, you might need to use things like NetMap. You need to use things like ping and traceroute and understand how to use all those tools. You do. But more importantly, you need to understand what is actually going on so that when you use these tools, many years ago, I was an emergency medical technician. I took people back and forth to the hospital before I was a paramedic. And they told me to, listen to somebody's heart. And here's what we were listening for. Lump, thump, 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 like it was there. Now, years later, I learned to practice internal medicine. And I knew whether I was looking for rubs, clicks, gallops, the normal S1, the normal S2, what a bad S3 or S4 would sound like. Before that, the stethoscope was just a tool. After the right education, I went, okay, this sounds like heart failure. Now let me do a 12-lead EKG. Now let me order an echocardiogram. That's the key to troubleshooting. It's your underlying knowledge of the technology. Mark's got a lot more troubleshooting knowledge than me, so I'm going to have him bring it in. But after coaching people for 20 years and seeing people that can troubleshoot, they understand their fundamentals real good.
So again, it depends on what role you're in. If you're going to be an engineering role, you definitely want to understand the tools of the craft, right? So if you're going to use some type of monitoring system, regardless if it's Nagio or something else, you want to understand how to interpret the system, how to read it. You want to understand, again, your baseline. What is the system supposed to look like when it doesn't have a problem so that you can identify a problem? Now, depending on what type of field you're in, Nmap might be good, or it might be viewed as malicious. So again, depending on the use case. Definitely when you're going to be working on a network, Nmap could be useful. Wireshark, definitely, especially for protocol analyzation, as Mike mentioned, that's going to be important. And simple things such as ping, traceroute. But more importantly, it's really going to understand is when you see the results of the things that you're trying to troubleshoot, you want to understand the systems, how it's supposed to work within the systems as it attaches to another system, because that's really going to help you understand where the problem is. Now, I can tell you firsthand experience, depending on what particular role you're in. If you're in a higher role, anything from a solutions architect to just an architect, a designer, you're not the first stop shop. Let's just put it this way. The reason they call you in is for a very particular set of skills, as they say. One of them includes you are really good at asking questions. Now, at first, that sounds very counterintuitive, right? You're troubleshooting, you're trying to fix the problem. But what I've been generally always called into when it comes to these sessions was not, hey, Mark, can you run a Wireshark trace? Hey, Mark, can you run a ping? Can I? Sure. But that was not the case of what was needed. I wasn't the engineer on that case. I was either the solution architect or I was just in general the solution engineer that was assigned to help us get over the bump. I was capable of asking questions and clarifying questions to understand what the baseline was and how do we get here. Because believe it or not, many times it takes us drawing out the information from the customers we deal with. Or if we're dealing with a vendor, let's say we're performing a troubleshooting session with a vendor, it's really asking those key questions. And here is another reason why you might get called in. You will have the ability to ask those questions, be able to speak the language of all the people that are with you on that call. But more importantly here is, and I believe this thoroughly, and this was always a goal when I was part of these type of sessions, is drawing the best out of people, especially my people, my engineers. I wanted to draw the best out of them because why? They were the subject matter expert on the solution, on the technology. I was the subject matter expert on how everything is supposed to fit together, but they know the details, the nuts and the bolts. I needed them to perform well. And that's what you're going to get called in for your leadership skills, for your coordination skills, bringing everybody on board. Very often, it's not going to have to do with, can you run Wireshark? Can you run some type of port mirroring if you need to bring it over? None of that is really going to matter when you get called in for that. I've been called in on cases, they're 9 months running. Do you think they called me in because I was more technically apt, had a higher technical aptitude than the engineer was working on it for 5, 6, 7 months? No. They called me in because they figured, you know what, Mark, he's going to find the right questions to ask to get us to a problem that can find a solution. And he's going to know our team, what they looked at, how they function, and be able to draw the best out of him. That's what you're going to be doing as an architect if you do get called into these. But just understand, very far few between are they going to call you in at 2 o'clock in the morning then as an architect. That is a real big pro of the job. They're going to call you in during business hours for you to help. Unless it's a multi-million-dollar customer, then you know what you're going to have to do? Get that coffee ready, because they're going to need you to make sure you keep that customer. But in either case, a critical skill to troubleshooting, analysis, and can you ask the right questions? Because I always had a lot of questions in trying to understand it. I was not shy if I did not understand something. And there have been instances where I asked the customer, what is this? I've never worked with the system. I don't know what it's supposed to do. Can you tell me what it's supposed to do? And then maybe I can help us understand how it's supposed to interact with our system. So it happens, but you ask questions. And that's one very important skill that you will need to know as an architect. Ask the right questions, bring in the information, translate it so that your entire team understands it, and then you can move forward.
All about asking the right questions.
Yep. You'd be surprised. I mean, there's a lot of talking going on in these troubleshooting sessions because you want to identify, right? We always go back to this critical aspect when it comes to architecture, anything, even if you're just trying to find your direction, right? It's clarity. You don't want to approach anything if you are not clear on what you're trying to approach. You might be working on things that are not problems. Who wants that?
Yep.
We want to address the root, not just the symptoms. Right? That makes a lot more sense, right? We want to kind of stomp it out, get rid of the problem, not patch it, and then it comes back another way, right? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Would you want to do that with your health? I mean, our system is run that way today, but do you really want that? Just to kind of, I'm going to get rid of my pain in my head of my headache. Don't you want to figure out what is causing your headache so you can completely get rid of it? I know I would rather do that. So just keep that in mind. Ask questions. Don't be shy. Okay, let's go on to the next question, Tyrone, please. Question from Jesus Garcia. How do I get experience as an architect if my current role is as a developer? Is it possible to jump from developer to architect? Or should I be a technical leader first?
Okay, Jesus. So how are you going to get experience as an architect? You're going to get a job as an architect. How are you going to learn to be an architect? You're going to have to get the right training. So here's the thing. Every job is completely different. I'm going to tell you about Arun S. He was working at Home Depot in a retail environment before we trained him. We got hired at TELUS. At the same time, Romanek Ivan Tamba was working as a waiter while he was a college student who was hired at AWS as his first tech job. Richard Ferrari was working in the fraud department, not on the tech side of a bank. We trained him and he got his first solutions architect job at MUFG. Jeffrey West was working in some kind of geology thing, and we trained him and we got him hired as a solution architect at Calian. Likewise, I'll tell you, I had people like Pratapal St. John who were developers for a while, and we retrained them to be an architect. Or I had cloud engineers like Harsha who would be trained for about an engineer to get him from his cloud engineering role to a cloud architect role. And here's the reason why. First, it's great that you're a developer. You now have experience in technology, and I'm sure you've learned a great many things along the way. But here's what you're going to be designing, for the most part, network and data center solutions. You're going to be designing an organization's wide area network, their demilitarized zones for their security, the type of storage that will give them the performance they need, the type of container orchestration in the system they need, the type and the sizing of the virtual machines that they need. You're going to be designing systems to improve business performance. And none of that's going to be related to development. But it's okay, because development still got you some understanding of certain things that would be helpful to know along the way, like APIs and how they would be used, and potentially systems integration. So there's always going to be something that's there. But you're not going to go from what you have until where you want to go without getting the right skills. So we have to understand what those skills actually are. And they are the following: business acumen, leadership skills, sales skills, executive presence, presentation skills, negotiation skills, and learning how to perform business modeling and understanding how a business would operate and how its processes would be and how technology will impact those processes. It's understanding that when a customer tells you they're trying to increase their revenue, you need to understand by how much, and you need to understand where their revenue pain points are. And when they understand that, you need to think about what can we do from a technology perspective to improve that revenue. The organization has some financial challenges. What processes could be automated? Where could we redeploy our people? Maybe people that are working in a post-sales environment that the company is costing money, but they've got some good marketing knowledge. Maybe technology could do that post-sales behind the scenes work, and these people could be moved to the marketing department to contribute to revenue. So you need to be able to understand the business and the business inputs and the components that go in here, and then what kind of technology selections and choices that you do. So it's not where you're coming from. I'll tell you from experience, it takes me 6 to 12 months to train a developer to become a cloud architect. And I'll tell you, it takes me 6 to 12 months to train a nurse or a mental health tech like Jennifer Ema before she got her first cloud architect job, because it's a new career. So the key is learning your new career and getting there. But you're not going to get to your career by taking somebody else's job. I mean, I know people sometimes get that way after decades in tech, but let's be fair. If you want to be an airplane pilot, it doesn't matter how many years you were a flight attendant. If you were a nurse and you want to practice medicine, you still need to go to medical school or go to school to be a nurse practitioner or a physician assistant. You can't do it because you've been a nurse for 20 years. So your next role should be an architect role. The actions you take today should be those that get you to that architect role. If you want it and you can do it, and it is the best role in the world. So tomorrow evening, we're going to have a webinar, and we're going to cover the entire skill set for the cloud architect job, everything that you need to know, from the business skills to there. But suffice it to say, you need to know networking, whether it be things like IP addressing, subnetting, supernetting, BGP, route aggregation, those types of things. WAN technology design, so that's nothing to learn. We teach it, but when do you use a private line versus an IPsec tunnel versus a software-defined networking WAN or a SASE WAN? When do you use a virtual machine and when do you use a container? How do you size that virtual machines? What kind of load balancing situation do we need for our environment? What type of databases should we choose based upon these business needs? How do we design for security? Those kinds of things, that's what we do as architects. And yes, you can go straight there, and I encourage you to do so. Join us in the free webinar. There's also a description of this video, in the description of this video, about a document on getting your first cloud architect job, which covers everything you need. And if you want to train with us, and we'd love to train you, we've got a 50% off promotion and for the July 4th sale. But I'm not trying to sell you anything. I just want you to know how to get the skills you need, because you do have valuable knowledge, but it's different knowledge. But life is cumulative. We'll find a way to make you use it.
Mike won't sell you. I'll sell you. You want to be an architect, you need training, period. Aside, if you can somehow make it into a role just by sheer luck, if you manage that, good luck. But generally, like anything, Again, this is not a novel idea of needing training for a role. This is kind of like what we all do all the time, right? Once you got into IT, they generally tell you go with like a Network Plus at A plus. Guess what? This is all training. It's a different question if you ask, is this the right training for the role I'm trying to go? But just understand, this is all training. You always need some type of training, some type of mentoring to understand what the job is going to entail. I've never met somebody that came out of a mother's womb and knew how to be an architect. It just never happens, right? So you need that. Now, is it possible to jump from a developer to architect or something else? Depends what you want to accomplish, right? So with the right training, you can go, never been in tech and being an architect. That is feasible.
Yeah.
Because through the right training, you will gain the knowledge, the application, which eventually you turn into wisdom with competency, and you will gain the experience. This is all experience that you gain, and to be a competent architect, right? So you can do that. But let's say you liked your company and your company had some way of actually achieving, they have actual architect roles. Perhaps for you to be able to do that, you may have to go through a different role first to get to your ultimate role. Now, what if I told you that that's okay? If that's something you want to do, you love, being with a company that you're working for, you've been there a while, it's really enjoyable, do that. Don't let anyone discourage you. But it might take a little bit more time. If it's going to take you a little bit more time to jump through these roles, let's say you have 1 or 2 roles you got to get to, this would be my suggestion. Get training either way. Because what's going to happen is you're going to be able to take this training that you're getting, which anyway, by the end of it, you can go wherever you like with it. But the nice thing is you're immediately going to have some application to that training. That's not just going to be based on, let's say, our program. It's also going to be based on your job, right? And the more input and stimuli you have to be able to apply something you learn, the more ingrained it's going to get, right? So it doesn't matter if you choose to stay with your company and then go through a couple of jobs, training is going to be necessary. If that's not an option, guess what? You're going to have to leave anyway. So you still need the training. So again, I go back to you need training either way. If it's with us, great. If not, we're here every week. We have the webinars that can explain the roles a little bit better. You're always welcome to come ask more questions. Again, seek clarity, seek a good direction. That's why we're here. Don't make mistakes that we made. You don't need to make them, such as be a help desk. You don't need to do that. That's not necessary. Don't let anyone ever tell you. You don't have to pay any dues. There's no legal contract anywhere that says you want to be an architect, you need to do this and this and this, you pay your dues. It's stupid. It makes no sense, right? Do what you need to do and what you love to do so that you can provide for yourself and the ones you love. And in extension, because you're going to help other people get what they want, meaning your customers, they're going to help you what you're going to get. So in either case, it's going to be a reciprocal relationship and it's going to be better off for everybody. So great question, Jesus. All right, let's go on to the next question. Looks like a follow-up question by Jesus Garcia. It says, I've seen some people mention that to demonstrate experience, they must teach a course, give advice, or have a blog. But wouldn't that be seen for a role as a teacher and not an architect?
Well, Jesus, this must explain why so many people on Udemy that have courses on how to become a solutions architect come and ask me to train them, but I won't train them because they're spreading a bad message. So here's the thing, Jesus. When you give a presentation, write a blog, if you're producing something that's quality, it's going to say, wow, this person's good. But if you don't know what you don't even know and you produce a course, which is what 99% of these Udemy courses look like, the person is going to show the world why they shouldn't hire them because they're going to show exactly what they don't know. So when you're great, yeah, I think it's good for you to go out there and build your brand. So the key is, let's talk about the difference. Writing a blog is good, and I encourage people to do it, but you're not going to be able to write a blog in 4 hours or 8 hours. A good blog for, say, an architect would be evaluating some business challenge that exists in the current space, and then being able to talk about the technology that could mitigate that challenge, and then maybe show how those pieces and parts could be put together. And that would be cited with references on economics, references on finance, projected values with regards to employee productivity, a business case where you're looking at the expenditure and then you're generating return on investment capital. So if you know how to do that, Yeah, go do that, because that will make you so good. My students do that. Because you have to look at what an architect would produce. An architect would go out there and they would speak at a conference. An architect would write thought leadership document. Now, a good blog can do that. Now, I'm going to tell you 99% of the blogs that I see convince me not to hire the person, because they're either spit out of a chat GPT and the person's trying to show me they've got an opinion by showing me they can go to chat GPT and print something out. Not that they have a knowledge, they have some wisdom, they have some thought. So I will tell you, Jesus, when I started my architecture career, and this was kind of the thing that took me out of that principal engineer into architect role, I was asked to write a paper on IP multicast for a technology vendor at the time. And I wrote this paper. Now, I didn't realize how big it was going to be. That paper hit a couple of big networking environments, some network operators groups. It was sent to all the biggest internet service providers in the world. And within a month, I had my next 200,000 miles of travel where I was speaking literally at presentations booked up for the next year just on that paper. Now, that paper caused me to get all kinds of promotions so there was that. And I will tell you, when I joined Cisco, Jesus, Cisco came to me and said, we need someone that can design architectures for healthcare needs. And because I used to practice internal medicine, and before that I was a nurse, and I also had been a CCIA working for Cisco as an architect, they popped me into that position. I created this 300-page medical grade network architecture, and that was my next 400,000 miles of travel, along with presentations, executive briefings, and multiple promotions. So yes, when you've got it and you can do it, go out there and create it. But make sure the content that you create represents you well. But don't teach a course on something you don't know. So I'm going to give you a secret on what employers care about. And, you can get any job you want, and it doesn't need to be an entry level if you have the following. If you're competent at the job you're applying for, meaning you can do the job and you can do it well. If the employer can trust you. If you can communicate well. If you know what you know and know what you don't. And here's the reason. Somebody made a mistake at Google and they took down the Google Cloud for the better part of a day. Somebody made a BGP mistake because they didn't understand BGP well enough at Facebook and took Facebook down for the better part of a day. So employers want to know that you know what you're good at and where your limitations are. They also want to know that you've got some energy, enthusiasm, and passion for the job. They want to know that you're a good team player and you're willing to go above and beyond. So when I gave you advice on a blog, that blog I gave you may take you a month to write. And it could be, an all-day thing for a month. But that level of content shows you know something. It shows you're competent. It shows an energy, enthusiasm, and passion, because the rest of the world wouldn't go to that level to spend a month on a blog. We'll cut and paste from ChatGPT. It shows that you've got some depth to you and you're willing to go above and beyond. And that's something that works for you. But, normally what I see most people do, it's either look at me, which that turns employers away. They say things that are anti-business, which that terrifies employees away. Or if I've got somebody that's teaching a course and it's obvious they don't know what they're teaching, now I know that person is not only incompetent, so I can't hire them, but I also know they don't know what they know and know what they don't know, so I can't hire them. And unless that person has the right level of presentation skills and executive presence when they present that course, it's going to show me that I can't hire them. So it all depends where you're at and what you're trying to do. But at least it explains why so many people that have AWS certification courses have asked us in the last few years to train them to become cloud architects.
This is a wonderful question, by the way, Jesus.
It is.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Let me just put it this way. It's the application when you do the teaching that matters. For example, you mentioned it demonstrates experience. No, teaching does not demonstrate experience.
No.
Teaching demonstrates competency that you can help somebody else understand a concept, okay? So when generally speaking, you hear these type of advices that go teach it to somebody, what this process of trying to communicate what you just learned to somebody else should really do is give you the opportunity to help clarify the concept in your mind. And since you're going to have feedback potentially from another person or multiple people, it also helps you understand what questions they might have and how you explained it. Was that clear enough? So from that perspective, that's really where that teaching comes in, or this idea of telling somebody else about it. Would you want to do that publicly if you have no idea, or you just started off? Probably not, right? So in that aspect, the teaching would not help you. If you wanted to do it privately to help you kind of get over this hump of how would I articulate it and kind of construct the thoughts in my mind, definitely go ahead, because it's going to show you some of your weak points. But when it actually comes to a teacher has the responsibility of trying to communicate the concepts to a wide variety of people that might be attending their class or their sessions. Every person is going to have a little bit of a different requirement on how they can understand this. So what you'll notice is a teacher might dive deeper into certain subjects, even technologies, that they would not otherwise do if they were in the architect job. And that's going to be quite a difference, right? Because you don't want to come off as too techie on an architect interview, but you may have to be quite techie when you're trying to explain a technology in a class, depending on who you have. Why? Well, think of it this way. Some people do better by seeing. Others do better by hearing you. Others might need to see it in action, right? So there's going to be a different way that's going to appeal to everybody. And that's what a teacher really tries to do. They try to find ways so they can connect with the student so that the student will accept the message and help them grow in that sense. But when you're just going out and you're learning these things, you want to have a different approach in how you want to now market yourself, how you want to brand yourself. Your objective is not to teach at that point, right? Your objective is something different. So it's a little bit, not poor advice, it's just poorly phrased and poorly explained in the Wild Wild West, or the Wild Wild Internet as we call it. So just keep that in mind. A teacher is a whole different type of character, could even be a mentor. So look at it more as maybe something private that you will do compared to something that you might public do. And on the channel too, you'll see many times we have really good, some short videos on when it comes to branding with LinkedIn and YouTube. Take a look at them and you can see exactly the difference that I'm talking there compared to what a teacher would generally do. But in either case, I still appreciate the question. It's a really good question because I see it all the way out there, right? They just said, put out there what you just learned. And it's like, there's always somebody better out there. You're not teaching them. So
yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
And avoid this. I'm seeing this pop up in blogs every day. So I'm seeing people write 80-page blogs on how to set up a web server. Please, I beg you don't do this, because in business it's about how efficiently you can communicate. If you can put something in information as, what do you call it? Yum install HTTPD, or a command like that, or sudo apt-install HTTPD or Apache or something like that, don't make a blog about it. So don't show people that you know how to do technician things. Make sure that it's about something substantial, about an impact you can make, so to speak, and the impact you can do.
Anyway, Jesus, great question. If you can make it tomorrow, be glad to have more of a conversation with you about these things. But you're on the right track. You're thinking, you're asking these critical thinking questions that are required on finding a direction, finding a clarity, because eventually you will need to pay attention. You need to give your focus to something so that you can move forward. So again, beautiful question. Keep it up, guys and gals. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, great questions.
All right. Question is from John O. It says, hi, Mike. I interviewed for an Associate Director Cloud Security Architect role. And after the first interview with the executive, they offered me a cloud security engineer role. What should I do?
Okay. So, John, I can tell you what happened here. And what happened here is going to be what you need to do about it. So I've also been in this position. Let's say I want to hire someone for a cloud security architect role, and they come in and they either don't communicate at the level I need them to, they can't present themselves at the level they need to be, they seem excessively techie, and they don't seem focused on the business or digital transformation. But I still interview that person and I say, wow, I like this person. This person's super smart, and I could see them being successful as an engineer, but not an architect. That's when if I'm running a department, I say, would you like to be an engineer on my team if I've got a slot? And if I don't have a slot on my team, but I really like the person, I pick up my mobile phone or my phone and I call a peer that I know that has an opening in an engineering department and say, I want you to meet this person. They are really good. So kind of understand that. So somewhere along the line, the business piece, the sales piece, the executive piece, you didn't show them. So now you need to determine what you want to do long-term and where you're at right now. If you need a job right now because you need financial support, I say go take it and continue your training to be an architect, assuming you want to be. If you're in a job right now and you've got some good financial backing right now and you don't need another job, I would focus on my sales skills. I would focus on my business acumen. I would focus on my leadership skills, my executive presence, my CXO relevancy, my presentation skills. And 3 to 6 months from now, I'd go out there and re-interview for architect jobs. And that's what I would do. Because you're not going to learn architecture by engineering. It's going to make you look more and more techie, which is exactly the reason they probably didn't put you in the architect role in the first place. But here's the thing. If you're not employed in cybersecurity and it's not the best economy in the world right now, and somebody offers you a good job with good pay, you can take that job. You can spend the next 6 to 12 months focusing on those architect skills and then go get it. And you'll do great. And all that extra time you spent focusing on the tech probably will help you anyway in the long run anyway, because the security role is more of a specialist role than, say, a generic architect role or an enterprise architect. But if you're in a rush to get that architect job and you already have money coming in and you're already in an easy for you kind of job where you can go in and just go through the motions, come home at the end of the day, and then focus your time on being an architect to be there faster, then I might do that. So what do you want to do with your life, John? Oh.
Yeah. And John, you mentioned something interesting. You said that it involves 50% architecture and 50% engineering. Generally speaking, if this is, and you can correct me if I'm wrongly assuming, but I'm guessing this is the security engineer role that you were discussing. That's still 50-50 somehow. If that's the case, and you somehow can't figure out if you can genuinely move up once you have your foot into the door, then that's definitely wouldn't be too bad. But I do have something on the side that immediately comes to my mind. If I'm taking this role and I was not able to gain the cloud architect role that I wanted to, that tells me that they either will have or have somebody for that role. If they have or will have somebody for that role, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to start building a relationship with that person, because sooner or later, I want that type of role too. So I want to learn from them, understand the role, because this is what might happen. And this is what we tell, I tell a lot of engineers, we tell our students too, if you ever find yourself in this role, the skills that you get from the right training to become an architect itself, it's these soft skills, these business skills that we're talking about, right? The communication skills, the design, the present, the selling aspect, these type of skills. What will happen is you will not actually be in that engineering role for very long. They're either going to move you up because that associate director is going to need help and the actual director will need help. It's not a one-man job, especially depending on the size of the company. Or the other thing that's going to happen is you're going to start participating in the community, showing them that you have competency, possibly branding yourself by writing good articles, right? Or maybe looking at some news and you're giving your proper architecture view on that. There's going to be plenty of people out there that are going to want a person like you. So as long as you focus on developing those soft skills, those business skills on how to lead a group, how to design, how to sell, how to present, you will not be in that role very much. So if that's what you need to do or you can do, definitely go ahead. Just make sure that if you don't, well, let me put it this way, you don't want to get pigeonholed, right? Take the role and then you can't go anywhere. Because what's going to happen is you're going to be miserable. Then you're going to leave in 6 months. Then you're going to have to explain eventually, hey, what happened after 6 months? Why you're leaving? You're probably not going to want to tell them the truth because the whole psychology, right? If you tell them that wasn't the role I wanted to take, but I took it, I got bored with it. The other employee is going to look at your human nature and be like, well, you seem to not really know what you want to do. Why would you take a role you don't want, right? You're not going to have time to explain it to them. So just be sure that if you do take a role like that, and you kind of go through a scenario, what we just mentioned, or like Mike said, if you need the job, you need the job. Very plain and simple, right? We all need to eat. We got bills. These naggy little pesky paper bowls that keep coming in, they don't stop. Take it. but be clear of what your end result is going to be. You know, don't get stuck in a role that's going to cause further complications down the line. So just keep that in mind, John. And aside from that, generally speaking, the architecture roles that you hear us discuss a lot and the ones that you want to be kind of trying to aim towards is not going to be that 50-50 threshold. If you have a 50-50 threshold, you're still a lot more towards the, and Mike can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I want to say a little bit more like the technical kind of architect or engineer.
Yeah,
because you're going to be much more deeper in the tech, right?
Yeah, here's the key. It's not going to be 50% architecture. It's going to be 100% engineering. Some of the time, what they're referring to is you'll participate in the design team with the security architects, and you will give them deeper technical insight. So it will be design engineering, not architecture. But you will have that opportunity, as Mark told you, to be focused and spending time with the security architect and maybe with the CISO, and maybe get to meet the CIO along the way based upon the size of the company. And that's going to be your chance. But you also run into that other thing of, do you get pigeonholed? If you are an engineer and people see you as an engineer and feel you as an engineer, will they see you as anything else later? Maybe, maybe not at that company. So also look at your resume. Because, you know, as an employer, if I see 4 jobs in 4 years, that's a terrifying thing. Because that means someone comes in and they're either getting laid off or they're leaving because they can't fit in. And if somebody keeps leaving jobs, I get nervous. Now, when I see somebody who keeps leaving jobs and they have 4 different 6-month jobs, and then all of a sudden they have a job and they've been there for a long time, what that tells me is they couldn't find a role that made them happy or fulfilled. I had a network engineering job. Instantly, I moved into an architecture. I had a quick opportunity for a lot of money as a network engineering job. I took it for 2 days and then went into a great network architect job on Wall Street and then loved it and never looked back. But I couldn't stand being in those engineering jobs. I love engineers, but when you're a good engineer and they're calling you in at 2 o'clock in the morning because you're the only person that can figure out how to fix it, or that's the only time where you can reboot a router to upgrade its code, and the architects are being treated nicely and they're going and having lunches and taking their clients to dinner, and you're working 16-hour days. For me, I said, I want to get out of this engineering thing. And I had much more fun designing it and then working in the business. But that's what I love. But we have to do what we love. So that's why I say you got to know what you want to do. But agree with Mark on everything he said, but also, what does your resume also look like right now? Because you don't want to make a jump for 6 months and then go somewhere else 6 months later if you've had a lot of job hops in the last few years. And if you haven't had a lot of job hops, you can take a 6-month job hop. It's no big deal. I went there. They're wonderful people, but I really wanted an architecture role. They told me I could be in this architect/engineer role, and it's been all engineering. They're wonderful people, but I'm just looking for a full architect role. And they could get that, and they'll understand that. So just have a good reason why.
Definitely. All right. Mike, I know we've held on to you quite long today. It looks like I believe we answered most of the questions that we had. It looks like Mohammed followed up a little bit, also said that it'd be important within the interview to understand that they're going to check you, just like what happened to John in regards to if you really suit the role, right? I will actually say this to John before you wrap it up for us, is the fact that they still offered you a role is actually very promising. It shows that they at least recognize your talents, your skills, and more importantly, they recognize your potential and what you can bring to the team. And that's why they want to hold on to you. So that is a very good thing. But future, if you do anything else, make sure you know what you want to do and how you want to do it, and then execute appropriately. So, and you're very welcome, John. We're very happy that it helped you. Again, if you got follow-up questions, we are going to be wrapping up now. Join us tomorrow. We got the webinar on Zoom as well. I believe it starts at 6 p.m. Eastern time. So you're welcome to join us, ask some follow-up questions, and we're going to be always happy to do this. Worst case scenario, we'll be here next week again, answering some of you guys' questioning else, and we hope you bring it. So, Mike, do you have any follow-up?
So absolutely. So thank you all for joining us today. I want to remind you that we have a How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar tomorrow night from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. Please sign up. It's on Zoom. We'll talk about the role. You want to ask us questions, we can ask you questions to better help you. And it's free. I also want to tell you that we are running a completely free AWS Solutions Architect Bootcamp. We will cover the entire Solutions Architect Associate, a percentage of the Solutions Architect Professional. We will cover a percentage of the AWS Advanced Networking, a percentage of the AWS Security Advanced, and cover all of the newer AI services that Amazon offers. And we're going to do that to make sure you really get what you need to truly understand the Amazon solution set. And it's completely free. It'll be live, 4 or 5 hours a day for about a week and a half, 2 weeks to get through the content. We've got a lot more content than usual. We actually have triple the content we normally do because we wanted to add so much. My team went behind the scenes, and even though architects don't configure, and we normally do things for architects, we created a tremendous number of hands-on labs that you can do that you'll be able to watch online and follow through. So it's probably triple the content of any other boot camp we've run free, and we're going to be doing that. And I'm looking forward to it. I love going out there and meeting people. I love doing whatever, as much training as we can for free. So come join us for that. And we're currently running a 50% off sale off of every product and solution we have. So if that's your desire, take advantage of that. Otherwise, I can't wait to see so many of you tomorrow night at the webinar, and hope to see so many of you in the free boot camps as well. Take